first of all, Thierry, let me congratulate you on this very interesting and successful event that we have here today. Very important and very topical, and you've brought together the whole financial industry to discuss this. I also like to thank indeed the other associations for being here, and Olivier Gersin for his keynote. And concluding remarks, to be honest, are always a bit interesting. On one hand, you're in a position of power, because, hey, you have the last word. On the other hand, I can never meet the eloquence of the speakers that we heard today. And indeed, if I do concluding remarks which do not reflect at all what the rest of the audience have heard, I make a little bit of a fool of myself. But indeed, as in these events go, it's customary to say how happy we are that we are at a conference, talking about the economy without the United Kingdom. I'm not that happy because indeed, as a European and as a Dutchman, I believe that Brexit is a regretful event. Many have said it before, and I will say it as well. But we will deal with it. Because indeed, there is something positive is that we all unite in finding the best income for our clients. And we will talk about European economy, and we have heard about European economy. The basic premise of this conference is, given the UK and London's central role in the financial sector, how are we going to ensure that European companies continue to find financing that they need for, and that investors will continue to have access to capital and investment opportunities. Indeed, a lot of talk was today about avoiding the cliff edge. And although I'm quite of an optimist, so even a cliff edge can have an optimistic feeling, because let's be honest, the moment you fall off a cliff, you feel for some time that you can fly. Of course, this is very short-term and also slightly naive. But I am optimistic about the chances of meeting the challenge if I see about the people, about what we've heard today. You see that European financial industry is trying to grasp, but there is a lot of responsibility. We heard from all the areas, the market capital, the banking, insurance, or banking you will still have to suffer from me, but indeed capital market finance, insurance and asset management. We also heard some interesting numbers. 43% of UK trading involves the EU 27, showing that London is indeed very much the capital market of Europe. A third of venture capital, but only 4% of loans. And indeed, I have no doubt that on loans, on basic loans, Europe will be able to bridge the gap. The adoption will be more difficult, as we heard, for services that go through a single gap. And we have a lot of interdependency still out there. 95% of euro swap clearing in the UK, but also major UK security settlement is done in the EU, and we will have to deal with that. But the main message I heard throughout all the panels was to avoid disruption. So many of my colleagues don't feel too optimistic, that don't want to fall off a cliff, because they know the feeling of flying is short-lived. Then we heard from Olivier that he urged market participants and us and the industry to also prepare for the worst case scenario. And for me, from the view of the Commission, this is a wise basic view. Indeed, in your scenario planning, you should also look at the worst case. But he also passionately, more passionate than before, I would say, talked about the Capital Markets Union and the necessity to develop that further. And I agree, because there is still a lot of potential to be had. And if we look at what has been done by the Commission needs to be helped. Because in the end, the Commission is a regulatory factory that can only do so much. It can lead the horse to water, but it can't force us to drink. And I believe that, especially in Eastern Europe, there is still a lot of potential to be had. The asset managers told us indeed that the investors must be reassured to continue to invest, to buy the products that are so needed in our economy. So again, the call for no cliff edge, but an orderly Brexit. And in insurance services, of course, as this is very much long-term, many of the insurance services are long-term contracts, it is essential that we have a kind of guarantee for existing contracts and that we do grandfathering. The global competitiveness of the insurance sector is also very important because in Europe we are number one on this, and it would be a loss if we lose that due to this unfortunate divorce. But now a few words on banking and banks. How do we think about Brexit? The same, I would say, as many of the other sectors in financial services. We need an orderly Brexit and a clear and concise process to deal with this. Because the first and foremost, the banks are, just as the other sectors, dealing with their clients and investors, wanting them to ensure that they can have access and that, that services will continue without or with minimal disruption. And indeed, going further, we do believe that as the European Union, the economy in the European Union is indeed for 80% bank financed, that we need to help develop a capital markets. And I believe that banks are well placed to help do this, because indeed, in their role as intermediary and with their market knowledge, they can do much more, and they need to deal with that. Most company financing comes through banks, but it is also, certainly with bigger companies, a very diverse, complex and rich way of financing. And indeed, together with other sectors, banks can help. Finally, indeed, banks will need to adapt their model. Indeed, access to capital markets is one thing, but in my view, there's a revolution ongoing. Because post-crisis, a lot has happened to the banking landscape. It was mentioned today that there is now a single supervisor. We all know that we are doing CRR and CRD review, which are our translation of Basel III. And indeed, the final negotiations of Basel can have a big impact on how we finance our economy. So, and then, of course, nobody wants to go to a bank anymore. Everybody wants a bank in their pocket, a bank on their phone. There is no patience. We want it and we want it now. So that is a big challenge for the banking sector overall, looking at the post-crisis balance sheet, which they need to deal with. Then having a possible disruption to the capital market in London, which they need so much. And going through the Basel reforms and to digital transformation. But I have no doubt that banks will reinvent themselves, because I do not believe in what Bill Gates once said, we need banking but no banks. I believe that the combined knowledge of the European bank sector and the fact that they are so close to the client and are able to draw on the expertise that they have will actually help. But the bank of the future will certainly be a difficult bank, a different bank, and a bank post-Brexit will also lead to new impetus, notably, in my view, to the CMU. So in conclusion, I am an optimist, even though I'm looking at all sorts of different words, but let's use the word, I've regretted this decision on Brexit. That is the most diplomatic one. So in triggering Article 50 in March, the countdown has begun for the UK's exit from the UK. Like everyone else, again, we are following the process very closely. First and foremost, to avoid cliff edges and to ensure a very clear follow-up. Of course, we have expectations from our political leaders and political decision makers. And it is up to them and their responsibility to ensure to the citizens of Europe that the process is clear and orderly. But also, we have a responsibility as financial sector. We need to rise above the short-term goals. So do not enjoy the flying if you're falling off the cliff. We need to keep our eyes set for the long-term health and growth of the European economy. So indeed, I think that I conclude very well if I listen to all my colleagues here and see that we all want to play a constructive role. We are engaged, committed and creative to explore all the solutions to make it as positive as it can be. Thank you very much.